Good evening, all. I'd like to call to order the special select board meeting of December 5th, 2021.
October.
Did I say, I said October
October
6th, 2021. Thank you. I'd like to recognize both the select board members and the public. Welcome all, and good evening. In the room with us is Janice, our videographer, Peter Rude, the town administrator. I'm Richard Wierzewski, chair of the Guilford Select Board, and Zon Estes is my colleague, also on the select board. We have another select board member here by Zoom, and that's Rusty Marine. Welcome all. The select board hopes that this will be the first of a number of meetings to explain the American Rescue Plan Act, known as ARPA, A-R-P-A, funding, and get public input on the best ways to distribute the $630,000 Guilford will receive from ARPA funding over the next 2 years. We've already received the first year's funding of approximately $315,000. As you will learn tonight, these funds are intended to help rescue organizations, businesses, and individuals negatively impacted by the COVID pandemic. We will go through the eligibility criteria developed by Congress shortly. The Select Board has sole responsibility for deciding where and to whom the funds go, and is responsible for timely reporting to the federal government on the expenditures. Just imagine what the reporting requirements will be like. At its meeting on September 13th, 2021, the Select Board deliberated over whether the funds should be used to fund one or two large investments for our town's benefit, or to spread the funds more widely in an attempt to help as many qualifying organizations, businesses, and individuals as possible. The consensus of the board was to do the latter, spread the funding widely. But we want to hear from townspeople what they think. As we listen to the town, the consensus may change. We also want to mention that the town of Guilford itself may be eligible to receive the ARPA funding due to the negative impact of the pandemic on tax revenue. If that were to be the case, the town itself would meet the federal government criteria, receive the funding, and redistribute it. We are exploring this potential and will know more as we move forward. We want to emphasize that there is no need to hurry to request and distribute the funds. We have until December 2024 to identify where the funding is going, and until December 31st, 2026 to expend it. We hope that creative and strategic thinking will allow our town and those of us who live here to greatly benefit from the ARPA funding we have received. As you all probably do, we want to keep this meeting to the 1 hour we scheduled it for. A technical matter. Please note that Peter Rude, our town administrator, is managing this Zoom call, and that BCTV is recording it so that it can be viewed later by anyone who wishes to see it. Peter has all of you on mute. Please raise your Zoom hand. There's a raised hand icon on your Zoom screen with questions and comments. Please save your questions and comments until we get through presenting the ARPA content we want you to understand. We are eager to have your questions and comments. If you ask a question that we don't know the answer to, we will pursue the answer and get back to you with it. If we do not get to your question or comment tonight, please email Peter at pederude@guilfordvermont.net. and he will respond to you. Now, Peter, please bring us to the federal government criteria for expending ARPA funds. By the way, all of this information is on the town website. That's where we are right now, but we wanted to have this tutorial for those who would be particularly interested. But you can find all the information on the town website. And we should look at our agenda first, actually. So I've given the introductory remarks. We're going to go into what the funding criteria are and examples of possible fundable projects. We're going to go through the frequently asked questions about ARPA funding. We're going to look at the schedule for ARPA funding in Guilford, and then we'll take your questions and suggestions for ARPA funding.
Can't see people's hands.
There we go.
All right. So as Richard stated earlier, or alluded to earlier, that back in March, the House passed the Senate amended American Rescue Plan Act, which provides $1.9 trillion in additional relief. So in the early fall of 2021, the state of Vermont will distribute $315,232.07.
Now, is it million?
$315,000 to Guilford, which we have already received. And then a year later, next fall, we'll receive a similar amount for a 2-year total of $630,464.13. Now, these grants that the town is passing through may be awarded to Guilford individuals, businesses, and organizations. And following, as you can see here, is the selection criteria. This criteria are broad categories that were established by the federal government. And the recipients will need to demonstrate, hold on, I just need to adjust this a little bit. A response to the public health emergency or its negative economic impacts, including assistance to households, small businesses, and nonprofits, or aid to impacted industries such as tourism, travel, and industry. That's point 1. Point 2 is respond to workers performing essential work during the COVID-19 public health emergency by providing premium pay to eligible workers, and or provide for government services to the extent of the reduction in revenue due to the COVID-19 public health emergency relative to revenues collected in the most recent full fiscal year prior to that emergency, which Richard alluded to earlier. And then make necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. Obviously, Guilford has limited water and sewer infrastructure at this time. What we do have is overseen by the Algiers Fire District, and that would be dependent upon their actions, whether or not they make any additional investments. And then, as like we discussed at the previous select board meeting, there's a lot of additional funding coming for broadband to Vermont. So we are holding off on spending the funds on this purpose for the time being.
For the time being. So let me give you 3 examples of how the criteria could apply. Let's say there was a business in Guilford, let's call it a retail business, that had to close for a number of days due to the pandemic. There was probably a great loss of revenue for that store. That store is eligible to apply for these funds. Let's say there was an individual who, a single dad who had to stay out of work because his kids were 5, 6, and 7 years old, and they had to go to school remotely, and he had to be with them. He may have experienced a loss in his salary. That would be an impact of COVID. In regard to organizations, let's say that there's a performing arts organization in the town of Guilford that had to close because of the pandemic. That organization its revenues would have been impacted by the pandemic, and therefore it would under the criteria that Congress has set out, they would be able to apply for these funds. So those are 3 examples of an individual, an organization, and a business where the impact of COVID was tangible, and which would then facilitate their application for the funds.
So next are going through the FAQs. So all of this information that I'm going to go through next is available on the town website, and you can access it if you from any page in the blue bar at the top. If you just click on ARPA, that will take you directly to this page. All of the frequently asked questions start off as the answers are collapsed. So the first question is, for what community programs may ARPA funds be used? And this is similar to what we discussed a few minutes ago, that assistance can be provided to households or populations facing negative economic impacts, including food assistance, rent, mortgage, utility assistance, counseling and legal aid to prevent homelessness, and a number of other things. The next common question is, may ARPA funds be used to make loans or extensions of credit, including loans to small businesses, loans necessary to finance necessary investment in water, sewer, and broadband? The short answer is yes, and you can read the further details which outline some federal requirements about making this type of funding available, and when the expenses needed to be incurred, et cetera, et cetera. Next question is, would investments in improving outdoor spaces such as parks be an eligible use of funds as a response to the public health emergency and or its negative economic impacts? This is a little bit more complex, and this would be a decision that the Selectboard would have to make, but there are multiple ways that investments in improving outdoor spaces could qualify. The first would be the recognition of the disproportionate negative economic impact on certain communities and populations. And this is defined in what the federal government is calling their interim final rule, which, if you want to get really bored, it's a very multiple 100-page ruling that explains the details of that. And that identifies the types of services that are eligible for uses in a qualified census tract, which unfortunately Guilford does not have any qualified census tracts at this point in time. But recipients may provide these services to other populations, households, or geographic areas disproportionately impacted. So,
let me just add that a qualified census tract refers to a specific demographic in a town or municipality, and it's usually underserved populations, which are majority.
So you can also provide assistance to some small businesses to enhance their outdoor spaces. So, for example, if we had a small business in town that had an outdoor seating area for eating lunch or such things, if they wanted to expand that or improve on that, there is a potential that this funding could be used for that. Or if we saw, apologies for that, if we saw any increased use in existing parks and or damage or increased maintenance, the town could use those funds for that. What infrastructure projects may ARPA be used on? In case anyone's wondering, very few actually, outside of water, sewer, and broadband, none actually. May funds be used to invest in infrastructure other than water, sewer, or broadband? It's complicated, and again, it comes back to the qualified census tracts, and because Guilford doesn't have any, it makes other infrastructure projects for us a little bit more difficult, which is why one of the reasons, not the only, but one of the reasons why the Guilford Select Board has opted to create a grant program to make these funds more easily available to everyone in town. What types of positions are considered eligible workers for premium pay? The federal government defines those as those workers who have performed essential work during the COVID-19 public health emergency, such as staff at nursing homes, hospitals, home care settings, farm workers, food production workers, grocery stores or restaurants, janitors or other sanitation workers, truck drivers, public health staff, child care workers, educators and other school staff, and social service agency staff. somebody needs to, yep, there we go. May ARPA funding be used for mental health services as we, skipped a couple. Is the 25,000 cap on premium pay under section B on a yearly basis or for the entire time of March 3rd, 2021 through December 31, 2024? It's for the entire period?
So that refers to somebody in a job within that period who had a negative impact due to the COVID pandemic.
Correct, and they could not receive
More
than 25,000. Is a $13 an hour the cap on premium pay? Premium pay, according to the federal government, is stated to mean an amount up to $13 an hour that is paid to an eligible worker. And back to the previous question, may ARPA funds be used for mental health services? Yes. And this relates to mental health care that was exacerbated by the pandemic.
So if the pandemic maybe made you crazy, you might be eligible.
May Guilford transfer its ARPA funds to another entity? So the short answer is yes. The federal government outlined 4 categories of entities which we may transfer our funds. One would be a private nonprofit organization, a public benefit corporation involved in the transportation of passengers or cargo, a special purpose unit of state or local government, or to the state government.
So that refers to transfer and not granting.
That's correct.
That's different than what we're setting up in Guilford. This is if you want to transfer the money, you can only transfer to those entities.
Play James Taylor.
Who's not muted?
Shuffling songs by James Taylor on Amazon Music.
Someone's got Alexa.
Someone. Very good. All right. May ARPA funds be used to be pooled for regional projects? Yes, is the short answer. This is another one of those very complicated categories, which is defined more fully in the interim rule. But yes, we could pool them with other towns, or a bunch of towns could get together and pool them to help, hypothetically, Wyndham Regional Commission on a project or something like that. But that's just an option, and it's a complex one. May ARPA funds be used to deposit into a housing fund? The short answer with this as well is yes, because investing in housing in neighborhoods to build stronger communities does fall under Section A of the federal ruling. Unfortunately, that's a little bit obtuse, and VLCT is still waiting on more information from the feds on that. And if you want to get to the nitty-gritty, here's 3 different links, some with VLCT, some with the National League of Cities, and the third link is with the Treasury.
Thank you, Peter. Now we're going to go on to the schedule of the funding and the first round of grants that the Selectboard has developed. The grant schedule, it was developed by the Selectboard. The funding was developed by the federal government. So,
Yes, so the first 2 bullets that you see there refer to things that have already taken place. Guilford has received its first installment of these funds. The second is the meeting we're having right now, October the 6th. The last 2, I'll just point out quickly, are just markers for us in the future that we need to obligate all the funds by December 31st, 2024. And we need to have expended all of them by 2026, December 31st of 2026. So it's the middle bullets that we're going to go over right now. The 12th of October is when we will open the application process for these funds. That will be made available on the town website. We have an application process. Then there will be, applications will be due on January 2nd. So it gives folks about 2 months to take care of the issues. October, November, December, actually 3 months, yeah. And then the select board will review those applications in the month of January with potential applicant interviews if we determine that that would be in our best interest to help us figure this process out. And then in February, we will distribute the first amount of funds of 2022, and then we'll go through that process again, we anticipate in August and September, beginning in August and September of 22.
Great, so that's the information that's on our website. That's the information that we sort of edited down from a lot of information that has been put out by the federal government and by the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. And we'll now like to hear your questions and your comments and if you have them, suggestions for where these funds might go.
Rick Seymour has.
And Rick Seymour's hand is up. Rick.
Yeah, thanks for taking the question. It seems to me there's two ways you can use the funds. You can distribute them to individuals who are negatively impacted in businesses. And I'm sure, and that seems to be with the direction you're headed. Or you can use, a portion of the money at least to make investments in things in town that can get matching funds with the ARPA money that Guilford might give them. I'm wondering if you're considering that and whether at this point, or you're thinking that all the funding is going to go to people who are negatively in businesses.
And organizations, there are three categories: businesses, individuals, and organizations.
Right, but are you thinking any beyond that, or is that pretty much it?
No, I would say that the select board at its meeting of whatever it was, September 13th, I think, decided that, and we discussed this, and we decided that the select board would like to begin by accepting applications for people or organizations or businesses that have been impacted by the pandemic. But it doesn't need to stop there. And there could be further investments depending on how many applicants we receive. So that definitely not ruled out to make investments that are allowable, town investments that are allowable according to the federal criteria. Does that answer your question, Rick?
I think so. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Don has his hand.
Don, you're on mute.
You need.
Okay.
There you go.
Just a small technical question about the time frame of the emergency. And in other words, let's say I'm a business that lost revenue because of the pandemic. When is the date on which one would calculate that revenue loss? Is it ongoing or is there an end date? And the second part of the same question is, what is the look back period? So for example, if I were in a situation where I had lost revenue from March 15th, 2020 until August 15th, 2021, what would be the dates that one would use to compare that to see what a quote unquote normal revenue for that time period would be? Would it be the previous 12 months, or would it be a 5-year average, or what? If you know this, thank you.
Do you know that answer?
So I know part of the answer, and then part of it we'll have to follow up with you, Don. And if others are interested in this, so one thing that Richard and I discussed is any questions that are asked tonight that are outside of the frequently asked questions, we'll find an answer to, and we will add to the list of frequently asked questions on the website so you folks can come back or direct others to see those. So, Don, I can tell you the final cutoff date is December 31st, 2021, is what it is at the moment as far as revenue loss. The other Three parts to your question, which was excellent question. We'll have to get back to you. I believe, as far as your question about the look back, I believe the answer is March of 2020 is the furthest you can go back. But I want to confirm that, but I believe that's what it is.
Does the dates that apply to somebody's wages, those dates
I
that,
thought that first date might have been the right
I
date.
think that's the right date,
March
so,
15th.
was it March
I'll
15th?
look it up.
We're gonna look it up, because I think that we went through, I think it was an answer, in the answer to an FAQ.
Right, I saw that.
Yeah.
Having to do with salary or
Yes,
or
so, and I
whatever.
think that may be
Yeah.
applicable to the situation that you're referring to.
Okay.
In the meantime, Anne has her.
Anne?
Hold on, I have to ask her to, oh, there we go.
This is kind of related. Thank you, Don, for the excellent question. I'm actually gathering information on behalf of the Guilford Country Store, not Friends of Algiers. And they've experienced two different kinds of disadvantage because of the pandemic. One, they certainly had a loss of revenue, significant. And they had, they closed for little bits of time, but they also cut their hours back. And now they're in a different situation where they can't hire, everybody knows this, you can't hire people because nobody's wants to work or looking for work. And so they were looking at the enhanced pay piece that is offered in this ARPA funding. So I'm curious to know if an organization like that has struggled in multiple different ways because of the pandemic can do a more comprehensive application based on a few criteria. We lost a lot of revenue, A. B, we can't, and they didn't pay themselves during this, a lot of the time. And they would like to be able to hire people, but they, can't offer them enough money to get people to come to work.
And so I would say the answer is a resounding yes to that,
Okay.
and every day that I go by the Guilford Country Store and see it closed and so forth, it seems to me that it is an example of exactly what Congress was intending with ARPA funding. And I'm trying to say that objectively, but we all live in town and we see what's gone on there. So I would say yes, and the application could be multi-pronged.
Thank you. That was my question. Thanks, Richard.
Any other questions or comments? Sheila?
Thank you. So I think it's just awesome that this town is being given a chance to go at least part way towards helping individuals, organizations, and nonprofits get to a whole, make themselves whole again after such a trying period and probably the trying period to come. I'm a little disheartened to see that there aren't more people on this call. I can think of a few people whose income has been directly impacted because of COVID.
Tell them about this, please.
Yeah. Well, I think you did a good job with the Front Porch Forum, and I don't remember if it's on Facebook and Guilford page or not, but I should probably look at that.
It was also in the newspaper, Sheila.
I'm sorry?
It was also advertised in the newspaper.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of all the social media accounts that people read now, just to try to, there's a Guilford Facebook page. And anyway, I also am mindful that $630,000 over 2 years has the potential for having a big impact on the town. I can see the complexities of relating those funds specifically to ARPA criteria, but I think it's possible. For example, so I think writ large, I would really like to see some examination by the Selectboard of the sort of now defunct town plan, but the town goals that the town agreed on between 2015 and 2020, and also the goals that were outlined in the Vermont Community and Rural Development Program with Guilford, and see if we could relate any of those things to the ARPA fund. And Richard, your example of a single dad who didn't have childcare or needed to stop his work, if there was a childcare center in Guilford that could have responded to the parents' needs, that would have ameliorated some of those hardships that so many parents went through in town. And we do have a nonprofit that would like to build a child care center. We have another nonprofit, Guilford Cares, that has struggled to meet the needs of food-dependent people, food insecure people in town, and they don't have a facility. And so I can conceive of a plausible use of funds for those two organizations, maybe together to serve the elder, the food insecure, and the child care needs of this community that would have had a big impact on the community had we had those services. So I don't know if we can look at that in terms of transferring funds to another entity or looking at pulling sewer up Guilford Center Road to a certain point where there might be some building, some land for building. But I would urge the select board to think not just in the micro, but also in the macro, and to see if there's some ways. I'm sure that a lot of these organizations have come to you for smaller things, but maybe with a bigger vision, we could have a bigger impact.
That's great, Sheila. Thank you. And I think that the select board will be thinking about that and working with the Finance Advisory Committee, which I understand that you chair, and to see whether there is potential to bring these funds more closely aligned with what our town's plan is in the big picture plan. So, and we are hoping that both Guilford Cares and the CC4G, the Early Education Initiative, will come to us to talk to the select board about their plans.
I just want to make the point that this is my personal opinion. I'm not representing the finance committee here because we haven't met.
Right.
But I feel strongly about it. So.
We appreciate it, Sheila. Thank you. Anne.
Thanks. This is just a quick, I forgot to ask this part. It sounds like the first distribution of funds would be in February. I gather there would be no possible distribution before that time. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes, that's the schedule we set. Yeah.
Okay. I was just thinking about the store, but that's fine. I just need to know what the rules are.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Comments, suggestions, questions? It's very exciting for a town to get $630,000 like this, and I hope that you will trust that the select board will expend those funds imaginatively and wisely and for the benefit of our town. That's what they're for. And it really is important. The rescue part of this is the part of it that's most important to me personally, which is that there are people who have really been considerably impacted by the pandemic. We all have been affected by it, but there are some people who have been affected by it in their revenue, in their income, and in their sanity. And we would hope that in Guilford we could help alleviate that somehow.
Don is raising his hand.
John.
A slightly embarrassing maybe question. If an organization had two different ideas for a proposal and couldn't choose between the two of them, thought they were both great, what would be the reaction of the select board upon receiving two separate applications for two different approaches? In other words, two for funding for two slightly different situations. Or would the select board rather, as some grant organizations do, rather have a conference to guide the organization in choosing between those two?
It seems, Don, thank you. It seems to I think probably we haven't talked about that, but I would guess that the select board would be happy to see both of these ideas. This is not a competition among organizations or groups of people for dollars. This is intended to be a response from the federal government. So our hope would be that if need can be demonstrated and it makes sense to the select board that this would be a strong investment, then I think that that's the intent of the select board, at least as I understand it so far. We'll see where things go.
Right, but I do think that it wouldn't be appropriate to make two so-called grants to an organization. I think it would be,
No.
that it would be an interesting idea to come and talk to the select board about the projects and then make a choice.
Yeah, the intention of my hypothetical question was that the select board might say, wow, we're really happy to have these two proposals, and this is the one we think is more relevant, and so that's the one we might fund, and the other one isn't. I wasn't suggesting that the organization would receive funding for both of them, but for one or the other.
So seeking advice from the select board, sure.
Yeah.
Seems reasonable.
Yeah.
I mean, that is reasonable, just in the sense that the final decision on the use of the funds and whether or not these uses comply with the federal requirements comes down to the select board. So I think presenting them both in one application is a fine way to do it.
Could I just
Yes, Don?
I'd like to just say one or two more things, and that's that one of the things I observe from being in meetings with folks around the state, not so much about ARPA funding, but obviously the issue comes up at most conversations that I'm involved in around the state. And one of the things that's being revealed is that each town is organizing all of this pretty much on its own. And this money is not coming down into the state and being organized at the state level and then being sent out under certain strictures. This is a very direct and free opportunity for each town to sort of figure out what it wants to be doing with these dollars. So it will be important for us, I think, it will be important for us to hear from as many people as possible about what are the best uses for these dollars. And we're not beholden to anyone else in the state to make the case to them. This is money that we'll be able to spend in Guilford for investments in programs and what's the word for resuscitating life back
Yes.
into our community as best we can. So each town, it's interesting how each town is kind of on its own, but that's kind of how it's working right now. That said, we're also staying very close in touch, I believe, with trends and ideas that are out there in the state and to make sure that we're making sense with what we're doing.
And Peter and I will be attending a workshop on ARPA 2 given by the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, where we're going to get more information, more refined information. I think that's coming up soon. In 2 weeks. And we'll have more information, and what we will post the relevant information that we've learned there on the website.
Rick Seymour has his hand.
Rick?
I'm sorry, I don't have video. Can I make a comment?
Sure. Hi, Marley.
Hi, I share Sheila's concern that there are not more people on this meeting, and it's often the people that are best at applying for things that get the money rather than the people that need it the most.
Yeah.
And so I think there's got to be a real way to spread this out. So I wonder if using some of the funds to do a mailing, or reach out to people and be clear that individuals can apply, and to make that an easy thing. Might be a good use of money, or some other way to really reach people. I think COVID has shut down sort of word of mouth has become more difficult. So I do have concern that this process will happen, and then afterwards people will say, "Oh, I didn't hear about it," and the usual people got all the money, and there'll be a lot of resentment, and there's no need for that. So
That's a good suggestion, Marley, and we can look into that, whether we can use the funds to send a postcard or something that in very briefly and succinctly explains what we're trying to do. But it has been advertised widely though, so please understand that.
I have seen it myself, I'm just concerned that nobody showed
No,
up.
I think your concern is very important. Rick? Did you have a question?
I've got a comment. I hope the select board is aware that Katie Buckley, who's becoming the zealot of the interface between towns and the state government, is the liaison in administering.
Oh, yes, we know that, Rick.
For
called.
VLCT. Well, she's very authoritative, and she gets right back to you, and she can answer questions you have.
She was in this room when the first day of her job. We called her and she came down.
All right, good.
So we have a good-
I hope you will continue to.
Oh, of course. In fact, she said that she was using Guilford as a model for how to, for what questions and comments towns had, because we were the first. Anything else? All right, well then, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Happily move to adjourn.
Okay, well, thank you all for being here, and I think it's
We need a second and
okay.
vote.
Do I have a second of the select board members? I see Michael and Rusty. Michael seconded, okay. Is there any discussion about the adjournment?
It's been a pleasure.
It has been a pleasure, and I would leave you with this. Please spread the word, as Marley's saying. We're not sure that the word is getting to all those who need to hear this. So word of mouth, as long as you have a mask on, would be very appropriate. And thanks, it's nice to see all your faces, and thank you for being here.
Please take a vote on your adjournments.
Oh, well, who's here to vote then? Okay.
Well, Rusty, Michael, and Zon.
Okay, I'm going to take the roll call. Rusty on. Okay, Michael? Okay, his hand is up. Zon, aye, and Richard, aye.
Thank
The
you.
motion carries, and we are adjourned. Have a good evening, everybody.
Good night. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.